The unearthing of King Tutankhamen's tomb a century ago, in 1922, is considered one of the greatest finds in modern history. Found unexpectedly in the Valley of Kings, Tutankhamun has helped us learn more about knowledge of ancient Egypt and the mummification process than all the other discovered mummies combined. Stick with the video to know what happened to those who opened his tomb, why King Tut's heart was missing, what killed the king at a very young age, who the two fetuses found buried beside the king were, and most of all, the infamous treasures discovered in the tomb. For 6 years, archaeologist Howard Carter had dug up the desert sands in Egypt's Valley of the Kings area in search of the tomb of the famed boy pharaoh Tutankhamun, but to no avail. That's when a local boy named Hussein Abd el-Rasul, who was bringing water to the workers, hit a stone step under the rubble, revealing this great piece of history. King Tut, as the boy is famously known, was born in ancient Egypt around 1341 BC, ascended the throne to become pharaoh when he was between 8 and 9 years of age, only for him to die a few years later, at the age of around 18 years. His father is believed to be the pharaoh Akhenaten, and his mother was also his father's sister, which was identified through DNA testing as an unknown mummy, referred to as the younger lady. Computed tomography studies published in 2011 revealed that one daughter was born prematurely at 5 to 6 months of pregnancy and the other at full term, 9 months. The boy pharaoh ruled Egypt for nearly 10 years from 1336 to 1327 BCE, during which he married Ankhesenamun. They had 2 daughters, neither of whom survived infancy. While only an incomplete genetic profile was obtained from the 2 mummified fetuses, it was enough to confirm that Tutankhamun was their father. Because at his accession he was still very young, the elderly official, who had long maintained ties with the royal family, and the general of the armies, Horemheb, served as Tutankhamun's chief advisors. After being crowned, he commissioned new statues of the deities from the best metals and stone. His second year as pharaoh began the return to the old Egyptian order. Both he and his queen removed a 10 from their names, Tutankhaten and his queen Ankhesenpeten, replacing it with a mun, getting them their most common names, Tutankhamen and Ankhesenamun. He moved the capital from Akhetaten to Thebes and rebuilt the stelae, shrines, and buildings at Karnak. Tutankhamun was slight of build and roughly 1.67 meters tall, and there are many theories as to what killed him at the age of 19. Despite being tall, King Tut is thought to have been physically frail, with a crippling bone disease in his clubbed left foot. He is the only pharaoh known to have been depicted seated while engaged in physical activities like archery. It is also thought that he walked with the use of a cane, many of which were found in his tomb. Traditional inbreeding in the Egyptian royal family also likely contributed to the boy king's poor health and early death. DNA tests published in 2010 revealed that Tutankhamun's parents were brother and sister, and that King Tut's wife Ankhesenamun was also his half-sister. Because Tutankhamun's remains revealed a hole in the back of the skull, some historians had concluded that the young king was assassinated, but recent tests suggest that the hole was made during mummification. A recent DNA research found more than one strain of malaria parasite, indicating that King Tut caught many malarial infections. The young king suffered from several chronic medical problems and deformities, including a curved spine, all of which may have contributed to his early death, but despite all these theories, his death remains a mystery. Let's now have a look into the infamous tomb. The discovery of the boy king's tomb caused a media sensation. Newspapers breathlessly reported on the myth that the opening of Tutankhamun's tomb awakened a curse that killed those who helped find it. The myth was refuted in a 2002 study that examined the records of people who went into the tomb shortly after its discovery. People who entered the tomb lived on average to the age of 70 and lived about 20 years on average after being inside the tomb. Those numbers were not unusual given the average lifespan at the time and age of those who went inside the tomb. While the treasures were incredible, the tomb was unusually small for a pharaoh's burial. It may have been small because the pharaoh died young and unexpectedly, leaving no time to carve out a larger tomb. It's possible that the tomb may not have originally been intended for a pharaoh at all. It seems far more likely that Tutankhamun's successor, a king who inherited the throne as an elderly man, made a strategic swap because just 4 years after Tutankhamun's death, himself was buried in a splendid tomb in the Western Valley, close by the tomb of Amenhotep III. Inside his small tomb, the king's mummy lay within a nest of 3 coffins, the innermost of solid gold, the 2 outer ones of gold hammered over wooden frames. The greatest treasure laid on the king's head, the iconic magnificent golden portrait mask, which contained more than 9 kilograms of gold and numerous pieces of jewelry and amulets, lay upon the mummy and in its wrappings. Other items buried with him to ensure that he remained strong, wealthy and well-fed in the afterlife included a leopard skin cloak, 4 game boards, 6 chariots, 30 wine jars and 46 bows among others. All 3 of Tutankhamun's coffins were similar in style. They were human-form coffins, shaped to look like the god of the dead, Osiris, lying on his back and holding the crook and flail in his crossed arms. But the middle coffin had a slightly different style, and its face did not look like the faces on the other 2 coffins. Nor did it look like the face on Tutankhamun's death mask. Tutankhamun's ostrich feather fan was discovered lying in his burial chamber. Originally it consisted of a long golden handle topped by a semicircular palm that supported 42 alternating brown and white feathers. These feathers crumbled away long ago, but their story is preserved in writing on the fan handle. This tells us that the feathers were taken from ostriches captured by the king himself while hunting in the desert to the east of Heliopolis, near modern-day Cairo. The embossed scene on the palm shows, on one face, Tutankhamun setting off in his chariot to hunt ostrich, and on the reverse, the king returning in triumph with his prey. We can see that Tutankhamun's body was badly damaged before he was mummified. Is the placement of his ostrich fan so close to his body significant? This gives way for another theory surrounding his death. Is this, perhaps, someone's way of telling us that the young king died following a fatal accident on an ostrich hunt? This has led to the suggestion that the young king was killed in a chariot accident due to a pattern of crushing injuries, adding to the list of endless theories. Why is Tutankhamun's heart missing? The ancient Egyptians believed that it was possible to live again after death, but thought that this could only be achieved if the body was preserved in a lifelike condition. This led them to develop the science of artificial mummification. Basically, mummification involved desiccating the body in natron salt, then wrapping it in many layers of bandages to preserve a lifelike form. The internal organs of the body were removed at the start of the process and were preserved separately. The brain, its function then unknown, was simply thrown away, and the heart was regarded as the organ used for reasoning. Due to this, the heart would be required in the afterlife. It was therefore left in place. However, Tutankhamun's body has no heart. Instead, he was provided with an amuletic scarab inscribed with a funerary spell. This may have happened simply because the undertakers were careless, but it could also be a sign that Tutankhamun died far from home. By the time his body arrived at the undertaker's workshop, his heart may have been too decayed to be preserved. Tutankhamun was also not buried alone, but in the company of his 2 deceased daughters, who were discovered as 2 small mummies in the treasury chamber of the tomb of the king. The 2 mummies were found inside an undecorated wooden box. Inside were 2 coffins laid side by side in opposite directions. Both coffins were covered in a layer of black resin and decorated with gold bands, which simply showed the deceased children as the Osiris. A second coffin covered in gold foil was in each outer coffin, within which the mummified fetuses laid. Artifacts from King Tut's tomb have toured the world in several blockbuster museum shows, including the worldwide 1972 to 1979 Treasures of Tutankhamun exhibitions. Today, the most fragile artifacts, including the burial mask, no longer leave Egypt. Tutankhamun's mummy remains on display within the tomb in the Valley of the Kings, his layered coffins replaced with a climate-controlled glass box. His golden mask is on display at the Grand Egyptian Museum, located near the pyramids of Giza. If you liked our video, be sure to like, share, subscribe and hit the notification bell.